So we're going to add 3 more vocab words to our wall. In your own words, what is a numerator? Emmanuel. What's a numerator?
I wrote down the number that is on top of a fraction.
Okay, perfect. Don't do this ahead of me. Stay with me and do notes with me. But it is the top number in a fraction. Now we're going to add a second half to that. The numerator represents the part. And let me explain to you what that means. If we had a pizza that had 8 slices, and you ate 3 of those, the part that you ate would be 3 out of 8. So the top number is going to represent the part. The 3 eighths, 3 would represent the part. Okay? So if the numerator represents the part, what do you think the denominator represents? Anybody?
How many?
But what are we going to call it?
How many? The whole.
The whole. If you ate all 8 pieces, you ate the whole pizzas. Okay? Not the whole number, but... Okay, so we know the denominator is the bottom number in a fraction. And yes, it represents the whole. It doesn't represent a whole number. It represents the whole. Because when you look at a fraction, you're talking about part over whole. All right, in your own words, what does it mean to simplify?
Like to break down.
I like that, to break it down, okay? I'm glad you didn't say smaller, because you're not making it smaller. It's going to be equal, but if you make a fraction smaller, that would be like saying 1/2 down to 1/4. Well, that's not simplifying, okay? So simplifying is going to be using the GCF. What is that? Absolutely. Using the greatest common factor, reducing a fraction to lowest terms. Now, what that means, lowest terms, when a fraction is in lowest terms, its greatest common factor is 1. 1 will be the only number that can go into both numbers evenly. If you think about 3/5, is there a number that can go into 3 and 5 evenly other than 1? Okay, so we know it's simplified. And that's why when you get to the rule where your numerator and denominator are one number apart, like 4/5, 5/6, 6/7, that they cannot be simplified because they're only one number apart, so your greatest common factor is only 1. Yes? Because anything multiplied by 0 is going to be 0. Yeah. So all of your factors are going to be 1 or greater. Yeah. Okay, so the first thing we're going to talk about today, a lot of people were asking me about the agenda board on the back. That does not say conversation. That says conversion. What is for my football people, what is a 4th down conversion? What is it?
It's a conversion from the last down before you get the opponent team ball.
Before you do what? So the ball changes. Okay. So a turnover. Something changes, right? So when you convert something, when we talk about a conversion, we're changing something. So what we're going to be doing is changing decimals to fractions and fractions to decimals. They represent the same thing. Everybody in here can tell me 0.5 is equal to what? 1/2. Okay, so 0.5 as a decimal is the same thing as 1/2 as a fraction. All right? So we're going to talk about how we move back and forth between decimals, fractions, and fractions to decimals. Starting off with decimals to fractions. Of course, we have some steps here. The number behind the decimal goes on top, which would be the numerator. The last place value is the denominator, and we simplify. I'm going to make this even easier for you. I want you to write this down. When we convert a decimal to a fraction, we write what you say. That makes it easier than anything else. You're going to write what you say. And my marker's not working great, but let's see. So the biggest thing there is write what you say. Somebody read this decimal in example number 1. Seba. How do you read that decimal?
0.98.
Say it as a decimal, not just numbers.
Like 98,000.
Nah, not quite.
98
98 hundredths. Okay, so listen to how we're going to write it. I just said it, or you guys said it, 98 hundredths. So when we write that as a fraction, you write 98 hundredths. That's all you do. You are writing what you say. Now, from this point, yes, we still have to come back over here and simplify. So we look at this, and knowing some of our divisibility rules, what number can go into both 98 and 100? Not 10. 2. They're both even. Okay? And guys, think about this. They're only 2 numbers apart. So really the only thing that could go into both would be 2. How many times will 2 go into 100? 50. How many times will 2 go into 98? 49. At that point, we are simplified because they're 1 number apart. Yep. So honestly, when you are changing from a decimal to a fraction, you write what you say. Before you simplify, all of your denominators will be 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000. I think we really won't go beyond 1,000. Not 18,000. Only in your decimal place values. Tenths, hundredths, thousandths, 10,000ths. Okay? Looking at number 2, somebody read this as a decimal for me.
15,715,000.
You got it. 15 and 715 thousandths. Now, do you hear what he said when we said our decimal? AN. So we're going to kind of put our whole number over here in timeout. We don't need anything to do with our whole number. We're not converting our whole number. We're only converting our decimal. So our whole number is going to stay over here by itself. And then I'm going to write what he said. 715 thousandths. Do we think we can simplify it?
Yes.
Yes. Why do we think? It ends in 5 and 0. So, somebody real quick on some scratch paper, do 715 divided by 5. And while somebody's working that out, how many times will 5 go into 1,000? 2 what? 200. Very good.
I got it.
What'd you get?
I got 143.
You are correct. Okay, so 143. I just happen to know that the only factors of 143 off the top of my head I can think of would be 13 and 11. Will 13 or 11 go into 200? No. So I've simplified that as much as I can. Okay? So again, just writing what you say. Some of these on an easier note, what if we had this decimal, how would we write that as a fraction? Everybody tell me. Just read the decimal. 3/10. Okay, and when you read it as a fraction, I want you to say 3/10. Okay, what if we had this one? 33 hundredths. Okay, and so forth. You could keep going. 333 thousandths. But your denominator will be whatever the place value is on your decimal. Any questions on that so far? Good? That part's easy, right?
Yes.
You literally write what you say and then simplify it. All right, let's talk about going from fractions to decimals. Here's your key word right here. We are going to divide. So, if we look at this, your numerator, always in the inside, denominator goes at the door. Now, do you remember we talked about what a division sign looks like? What does it look like? A fraction. So we're going to look at these. These are division problems now because we're converting them to a decimal. And I want you to read it from top to bottom. So this you would say 8 divided by 18. It's not 18 divided by 8. It's 8 divided by 18. So 8 goes in the box, 18 on the outside. Now, up until about a week ago, you would have said, oh, but you can't do that. I can add a decimal. Does this change the value of that 8? No. And we know that we're not going to get a whole number because we know we would have to have an 18 in here for my answer to be at least 1. So we know it's going to be less than 1. So start off to begin with, adding a decimal. I usually put 2 zeros. That's just me. You can add 1 at a time if you want. Okay? So we know 18 cannot go into 8. Can it go into 80?
Yes.
How many times?
4.
4. Very good. Okay, so 4 times 8 would give me 32. 4 times 1 is 4 plus 3 is 7. So what would we have left over? 8. Oh, what's going to happen?
Bring it down.
It is a repeating decimal. So once we figure that out, we can stop. So your answer, equivalent to 8/18ths, would be 4/10 repeating, or, and I'm going to write both. You don't have to write both. I'm telling you both of these would be fine. If you did 4/10 repeating or 44/100 repeating.
Could we just write a fraction?
We're not writing a fraction. We're changing a fraction to a decimal. So for this answer, you should not have a fraction at all. Should be a decimal. This I just wrote 2 answers. That's 4/10 repeating or 44/100 repeating. Okay, let's look at the next one. What again we do with that whole number?
You keep it.
I'm gonna put him in timeout because he has got to think about what he's done. So.
He's a bad boy.
So here we go. Now we're looking at this as 16 divided by 20. So again, 16 inside, 20 on the outside. What do I need to do?
Add a decimal.
Decimal. I'm only going to put 1 0 this time because I kind of have a little heads up that that's all I need. Can 20 go into 160?
Yes.
How many times?
8.
8 times. That gives me 160. Do I have anything left over?
No.
I am done. So that becomes 5. And see, I just combined my whole number that I already had, added my decimal to it.
So it's
5 8/10. Now, look at that fraction.
It's
8/10. Is 8/10 equivalent to 16/20? Oh, there it goes. Everybody's like, oh, okay. If I divided both of these by 2, I would end up with 8/10. So if I had 8/10 as a fraction, just like, let's say, I have 7/10 as a fraction, do I have to divide those to change it to a decimal?
No.
What do I do?
7.
I just write 7/10. So if you happen to have a denominator that is 10, 100, 1,000, you don't even have to divide. You just write it as a decimal. Yes, question?
So let's assume 8 divided by 18 on number 2.
Uh-huh.
You put the 5 on the division problem in front.
I don't. No. Like, are you talking about like right here?
Like on the box.
No. Mm-mm. All you're doing is dealing with your decimal. You're not messing with your whole number at all. Just converting your decimal. Okay, let's try the next one. So again, our whole number, we're going to put over here to the side. And then we have 4 divided by 45. Now we got to be careful on this one. Add decimal and zeros. I know 45 can't go into 4, but can 45 go into 40? No, guys, you have to put a 0 here. Once you put your decimal, you have to put your 0 there. So many of you on your test last Friday, the answer was 203.5, I think it was 205.33 or 203.55. So many of you missed the 0. Yep, raising your hand, you know it right off the top of your head. Okay, so here's the thing. You have to know, once you put that decimal, you have to have something at every place from here on out. So if it won't go, you have to put the placeholder. Can 45 go into 400?
Yes.
How many times?
8.
I agree with 8. 8 times 5 is 40. That's 32 plus 4. That gives us 36. So what's 400 minus 36? Or 400 minus 360?
40.
What's going to happen? So we are repeating again. We figured that out. So when we write our answer, we can put 7.08 repeating, or you can put 2 8s if you want to, but make sure your bar only goes over the 8. It doesn't go over the 0. The 0 is not repeating. Only the 8 is. Any questions so far? All right, flip over to the back. I want to do a couple with you before you. Okay. What you don't finish is homework, but we're going to do a couple together. I just want to make sure you're on the right track. So looking at number 1, somebody read this decimal for us. Ashton.
3,500.
3,500. So guys, I'm going to write exactly what he said. 35 hundredths. Can I simplify that?
Yes.
What can I divide by?
5.
I agree. So divide both by 5. 35 divided by 5 is,
27 over 20.
and 100 divided by 5 is 20. Okay? Now, be careful on number 2 because we're going to have to show a lot of work. Okay? Someone read this decimal for me. Ashley. Okay, did y'all hear what she said? 12 and 9/10. Make sure to show all your work. I'm joking. That's it. That's all you write. That's it. You can't simplify it. That's it. You're just writing it as a fraction. But when you read it, you're saying the same thing. If I read this number, I say 12 and 9/10. If I read this, I say 12 and 9/10. So you say it the same exact way, no matter if it's a decimal or fraction, okay? All right, let's look at the bottom. We have 6 and 1/5. What are we going to do with the 6? Okay, it is in timeout. Now, I want to show you one thing real quick. Remember a while ago I said if you could get if you could get a fraction that had a denominator of 10, 100, or 1,000, can I change this fraction to an equivalent fraction with a denominator of 10? Okay, and I'm going to show you why here. 5 times 2 gives us 10 times 2. Is that the same thing? Absolutely. Now, look what happens, and you don't have to show both ways. I just want to show you how it will work both ways. Again, decimal, I'm just going to put 1 0. Okay, so I'm doing 1 divided by 5. Can 5 go into 10? Yes. 2 times, nothing left over. The biggest thing I want you to see is that, guys, decimals, fractions, and eventually when we get to percents, they are all the same thing. It's just a different way of showing the same thing. So when you look at this, if I were to read this fraction, if I made it 6 and 2/10, it's the same as 6 and 2/10. Okay? But again, if you don't like having to figure this out, this will not work every time. Actually, this is the only time this will work. I take that back. You could do it for number 11. How could I make my denominator 10, 100, or 1,000? What could I do?
4 times 5.
Well, not 4 times 5. 4 times 25 to get to 100. So you could do it on this one. But it won't work for these others where I can't easily get my denominator to be a 10, 100, or 1,000. I'll show you this. Well, we'll do that. Well, no. All right, we'll do this one. Okay, so let me show you both ways. Again, whole number, what are we doing? He's over here. Okay? So, like what we were saying, if I have 3/4, and I know, in my mind, I know 4 will go into 100 an even number of times. So I can change my denominator to 100. How did I get there? By 25. So I can do the same to the top. And what does that give me? 75. Okay? So if I look at the same thing and do 3 divided by 4, okay, 4 will go into 30 7 times. I have 2 left over, bring my 0 down. 4 goes into 25 times. See, you're getting the same thing, just 2 different ways to do it. But you can only do this method or this strategy, I guess you could say, if your denominator can equally or evenly be a 10, 100, or 1,000. Has to be one of your place values for decimals. And right now we won't go past 1,000. All right, so at this point I have now done 4/12, 1/3, or 33 hundredths of your homework with you. Okay. See how all of those are the same?
Thank you.
4/12, 1/3, 33/100 repeating. Okay. So you just got a couple of them to finish. Make sure though, guys, you are checking with simplification. Okay.